Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first breakout sessions of the Sydney World Pride Human Rights Conference. It's really exciting to be here, and thank you all for your patience for the commencement of this session. My name is Andrew Purchase, my pronouns are he and him, and I'm your host for the session this afternoon. I'd first like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation upon which we are located today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd like to extend that welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders, people who are here today, and in particular those from the Wiradjuri country, the land where I grew up. For those with visual needs, I'd like to provide a very quick description of myself. I'm middle-aged, have strawberry blonde hair, I'm about 193 centimetres, wearing a blue shirt and bone pants. I've got a face which has seen too many rugby scrums, and I'm wearing a collared shirt and R.M. Williams boots. I'd also like to have a warm welcome for all of those people who are attending here today. They're in person, and approximately the 400 people who are watching online. It's wonderful to have such a huge audience today in this really exciting session contemplating the future of inclusion in sport. Today's session will have three great lightning presentations, each approximately 10 minutes long. We will be covering issues impacting trans and gender diverse athletes, considering the human rights violations against athletes with variations of sex characteristics, and be considering homophobia and biphobia in sport. This should pretty much cover the complete spectrum of LGBTIQIA+ communities. After the lightning presentation, you will have the opportunity to pose some questions to our panel. So I strongly encourage you to do that. In order to do that, if you could download the app, there's a QR code up on the screen. You'll find in the menu bar, you'll find an area where you can plug your question in. You need to nominate Cockle Bay Room 1 in order for your question to be directed to this room. And then it will be posed to the panellists you choose, or each of the panellists will have an opportunity to answer it. I strongly encourage you to do that as the presentations are being delivered. There is no doubt that we have made huge gains in improving the inclusion of same-sex attracted athletes, spectators, volunteers and coaches and administrators over the last 10 years. However, we came from a very low base. Just 10 years ago, most sports used anti-vilification and anti-discrimination legislation to be their only means to promote inclusion of sport for the LGBTIQA+ community. Very few sports, if any, actively promoted their sports to our communities. Still, Ian Roberts, Josh Cavallo, Andy Brennan remain the only elite athletes who felt sufficiently comfortable to come out while still competing. Still, only a very small number of Olympic male athletes have felt sufficiently comfortable with themselves to be out while competing. Fortunately, same-sex attracted female athletes are significantly more common, and that has been the case for quite some time. In many respects, the situation for gender diverse and athletes with variations in biological sex characteristics, the situation has actually deteriorated locally and internationally over the last 10 years. The current reporting and common understanding is steeped in ignorance, very little science and bigotry. While our communities generally have made significant gains, for example, same-sex marriage, this area has become the new battleground. We have a number of international sporting bodies banning trans athletes from all competition, regardless of whether it's elite or community-based. This is based on very poor science, if any science at all, and has little recognition of the difference between sports or the type of athletes competing. This stance has provided coverage for many national and local sporting bodies to do exactly the same, without putting any independent thought on why they are doing it or what are the consequences. We still have much to do to ensure that sport is sufficiently respectful and inclusive of our communities, and we are extremely lucky to have the calibre of speakers here today to be able to lead us in this extremely important conversation. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ricky Coghlan, who will discuss responding to threats to trans and gender athletes. Ricky is an absolute trailblazer, being one of the very first trans athletes in Australian sport. She came out as a trans athlete in 1991 as a middle distance runner in Australia. She has worked extensively with Athletics Australia and the Australian Institute of Sport. She's a long-term advocate for trans athletes and is an ambassador for Pride in Sport and International Pro Athletes for Athletes Ally. Please welcome Ricky Coghlan to the stage.